right, here we go. Hello there, Roger Christian.
Hi.
Is that right?
Hi.
Roger
Yeah,
Christian.
Christian.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. So you were born in England, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I grew up there.
Uh, and then you started working for Hammer Studios sometimes, right?
I worked for a lot of different people and companies, yeah, working my way up. So,
Oh, what was the first
uh,
company you worked at?
the first one ever was um, I was lucky. I got the job as T-boy for John Box, who was the designer of Dr. Zhivago, and I was
Oh,
working on Oliver, the musical, which was a huge movie. And somehow, because I knew nobody in the industry and I didn't know how to get in, but endless letters and pushing and doing architecture for 2 years at Oxford because they recommended that, I finally, actually by accident, I ran out of money, sold my car, got a hitchhike home, and an architect picked me up. And he said that one of his staff had worked on Cleopatra.
oh,
And he were because Cleopatra was such a huge movie, they were taking draftsmen from all over England to help. And he set me up with this wonderful designer called Charlie Bishop, and he was just finishing a very famous series called Department S, and he set me up with John Box, who he'd worked for on Dr. Zhivago,
oh,
and John Box took me on as T-boy.
nice.
Yeah.
So was that your first movie then, Dr. Chivago?
That was the first thing I ever worked on. No, Oliver. It was the musical Oliver. He made that after Dr. Zhivago.
Ah,
Um, and it was huge, massive movie.
yeah, a
Um,
very big movie to start with then.
yeah. So, and I realized I was getting frustrated, and John Box knew that I could draw because I'd done art school and architecture school. So I decided to take a risk and started making worse and worse tea and coffee because it was endless.
Oh,
Um, there's a huge art department, and I got promoted. So,
oh,
which
that
I,
was interesting.
yeah, well, John Box mentored me. He really took to me, and he was the most wonderful designer. I mean, the man designed Lawrence of Arabia.
Ah, that's a good movie.
Um, yes, all of these, Doctor Zhivago, which incidentally was the film that made me want to go into cinema.
Mm,
When I when I was at art school, my mate there bought this old Jaguar for £50, and we drove to London with two girlfriends and watched Dr. Zhivago in the big cinema. And
nice.
I literally had an out of body experience when I saw it. I was so overwhelmed by
I can
the
imagine.
vision. Yeah, so there I was by serendipity, luck, working for the designer of it. And he really mentored me.
Oh, very nice. So how did you? Was that? No, that must be after you went to Hammer, then.
No, just I worked in Bray Studios for a short while at Hammer, that's all.
Ah, right.
In fact, that's when we were doing Alien.
Ah, so that
Um,
okay. Then I haven't had
yeah,
this. I thought the Hammer was before that, for Alien.
no, no, no,
Mm.
no. That was just, I worked on a few smaller independent movies, a lot at Bray Studios, which was the home of Hammer.
Ah, okay.
And yeah, so
Let's
I
jump
watched Hammer
to
movies.
explaining how did you end up in this movie?
Which one's that?
Star Wars.
Well, that kind of working my way up. Um, I often partnered with a man called Les Dilly, and I did the visual set directing side of the movies, and he did the construction side.
Mm.
And I got a call if I would go to Weymouth to work on a film called Lucky Lady.
Mm.
Um,
I haven't seen it. That
and I
seems really
did.
nice, that one.
It's it's well, when I read the script, which was written by Gloria and Willard Huyck, it was probably the best script I've ever read. Um, and it was rum running in the 30s, and it had Lisa Minnelli, who was a kind of nightclub singer,
Mm.
with Gene Hackman and Burt Reynolds in it.
Right.
So they hired Stanley Donen, who's singing in the rain. I mean, he's a legend, Stanley, to direct this film, but it was a huge action film.
Oh, the Lucky Lady.
So yeah,
Oh,
and
okay.
they they'd gone out of control, literally. This film was the most expensive film it ended up with at the time ever made.
Mhm.
And so my mate was in the art department there. There were only three of them handling this huge film, so they needed an extra hand. So I was called to go out and work. And John Barry was a designer, so they put me on set decorating. And Gloria and Willard Huyck were friends of George Lucas's at college, and in fact, they wrote American Graffiti for him.
Right.
So John Barry and I became huge friends with Gloria and Willard. They were just really great people, like-minded.
Excellent to
And
have those kind of friends.
yeah, so George, at the time, all the studios had lost their box office kind of credibility, and they were all taking on young directors to try to revive things.
Mm.
So Alan Ladd invested in George Lucas because of American Graffiti. And when George went in, he came in with the worst nightmare for Alan Ladd, a children's science fiction fantasy. And there was no box office for science fiction. No one ever went to see it.
Right.
Um, so they had done a budget, and 20th Century Fox estimated the film would gross $12 million. So at that time, they divided that by three. And
Mm.
so they told George, if you can make your movie for $4 million, we'll consider doing it. Now, the budget was eight. 20th Century Fox in London said that they were half the price of America at the time because there wasn't much going on.
Mm.
There were no studios available in America, and they were empty in England. So they said, "Well, why don't you do it in the UK?"
Right.
Gloria and Willard then said to George, "Well, listen, Roger and John Barry, the designer, are doing exactly what you're talking about because George wanted to make a spaghetti western in space.
Yeah,
He
right. That
wanted
is what it is,
something."
essentially. Yeah.
So George came down to meet us with Gary Kurtz. Just the two of them came down. I was shoveling salt. I was preparing a salt factory. George, and we were all like students at the time. Right? We were all very young. And George picked up a shovel while he talked to me and helped me spread salt
Oh.
and described what he wanted to make. And I told him, look, I'm a big fan of science fiction. I read a lot, and I'd never connected to any moving before. They were all over designed. Nothing was real,
Right. Right.
basically. And I said, look, I think a spaceship should be old and dirty and repaired and dripping oil in a garage.
Right.
You
I
see,
think
in little,
around this time there was a lot of drive-in movies and TV shows that was or TV episode like Cinema Small, like Big Score and stuff. That there was episode on cinema, I think,
Yeah,
and driving
yeah,
things.
and Flash Gordon,
Flash,
which
yeah, Flash Gordon.
which I liked for what it was, but I didn't like as a cinema experience, nor did the audience. It just was
Mm.
so unreal. It's nothing connected to an audience. Um, Having said that to George, I only realized later that I'd exactly described the Millennium Falcon, which in the
Nice.
script is described as a piece of junk. So that was it. John Barry and I were hired immediately and told to start in London on August the 3rd, I think it was.
Nice. Did you work
Um,
anything designing anything with the Millennium Falcon then?
I had to do the whole interior and exterior. I had to create the look of it. John built it as a stage set.
Right.
Um, in London, when we looked at the budget, it was impossible. I mean, no one could do it, what
Mm.
we had for the art department. But being who I am and the training that I'd had, and having a job that was my dream job, I decided I would go completely unconventionally
And
and
it did
make it
pay off
work.
though.
Well, it did. What I did, we had two things. That there were Fox hadn't given any money when George arrived in London. He had a little bit of money on his own.
Mm.
We had a tiny studios in London, and just the art director Les Dilly and myself and John Barry with a carpenter I'd hired who did all the Monty Python films.
Right.
That was it for 4 months. The film and Fox wouldn't green light until the budget was down to the fore.
Huh.
So when we read the script, I knew I couldn't make any weapons. There was a lot of them. So I thought, okay, I'm going to use what my idea had always been to get used World War II guns and adapt them slightly.
Ah, right.
So I went off on my own and got a Sterling submachine gun, which is I loved. It's a sci-fi weapon to me on its own. Stuck some T-strip around the stuck some T-strip around the barrel, and stuck some old sights that came from army in Ireland on the top. And I thought, yeah, that's a stormtrooper's blaster.
Ah,
And he'd always described Han Solo as a Western cowboy. So
right.
I found a Mauser, which is a World War II German gun, which had a wooden stock, and to me, I could have used it as it was, but I changed it. I stuck sights on the top, put a thing on the end,
That's
and I
good
called
thinking.
George over. Yeah, well, I called George and John Barry over because I hadn't told them what I was doing and said, you better come and have a look because if I'm on the wrong track, I'll be fired.
Mm. Yeah, that
Um,
makes sense.
George, yeah, George loved them, and he stayed with me, and we stuck together a practice pistol and made Princess Leia's.
Ah.
And
Did you make
at the same,
Han Solo's gun?
yeah, that's the one.
Ah.
That's Han Solo's blaster from the Mauser. And
Yeah.
at the same time, reading the script, we realized that there was no movie if we couldn't make R2D2 work.
Right.
See, we had 6 paintings that George brought over that Ralph McQuarrie had done. C3PO we knew we could make because they'd done it in Metropolis. They've got
Mm.
Maria basically walking 3 steps, but we knew we could improve that and make that work. But R2D2 was 4 foot, and there was no radio control that really worked very well at the time, and there was no CGI. Don't forget,
Yeah, I
this
think
was
I've
long
seen
before anything like that.
some behind the scenes where you guys had some kind of remote, but it just went one way and right into the wall,
Yes,
basically.
that's what happened with it. Well, we had to make it work, and we found Kenny Baker because we took the experience of the Daleks in Doctor who had people inside them.
Right.
So they
That
found
makes
Kenny
sense.
Baker. Yeah, he was 3 foot 8 inches tall, and so we built. We had no money. You have to understand this. No one would give us any. So
Basically, to do that.
the carpenter had some wood at home. He brought it in and made a cylinder and made the legs out of it in wood.
Right.
I found a lamp top in a junk pile that we bought for 10 shillings and stuck on the top. And I stuck some bits and pieces I'd found to make it look a little bit like a robot. And we managed to get that to walk. So, that was then handed in to the special effects who made aluminium ones. And the thing that you're pointed out about it was the first day of shooting, and John Barry had called Les and I into his office right before shooting and said, "This is not going to work. You're going to be miles out in the desert. The radio control is never going to work. So make a lightweight one that you can pull on fishing wire."
Ah.
So very first shot actually on Star Wars in the desert was buying the robots from Uncle Owen. And exactly what happened. It came down and crashed, it fell over, it didn't work. So from then on, all the three-legged versions we pulled on fishing wire on boards, hidden boards in the desert. And Kenny Baker made him walk and react in the two-legged mode. This is how
Interesting.
Star Wars was made. It's
It's really interesting
exactly
to hear these stories that because when you have the facts of what happened with it later, then hearing all these things is like it's amazing that you cannot put it together really. That it becomes
yeah.
such a big and beautiful thing, and also that you won an Academy Award for it also.
Well, it's true. See, I couldn't. We didn't have any time to make anything. We didn't have the money to make anything. And like with the Millennium Falcon, I wanted it to look like an old submarine or an old bomber.
Mm.
So I bought aeroplane junk and scrap. There were piles of it around some of the scrap yards in England. And I broke it all down and we stuck that into the sets to make it look like the whole interior is covered in scrap and old water pipes and telephone exchanges that were being pulled down. Anything I could find to make it look like a machine that worked, like a spaceship that actually. So yeah, it
Most of the times
was
it is
all.
the limitless that when you're limited you get more creative. When you have too much stuff you just go the easier way most of
Yes,
the times.
very true.
So,
Yeah, we were. Nothing ever was made like Luke's binoculars. I found an old camera that was broken and a stills camera that was broken and stuck them together with super glue and stuck two old camera lenses on the front and I made his binoculars. I, I,
that's
I did
excellent.
everything like that in my room. Nothing was made like a specifically for a movie through the workshops, which is traditional. Nothing. We just didn't have time.
Can you tell me a little bit about the poster behind you? I haven't seen that Star Wars poster.
That's the original. That's my favorite. That's the one George has got up in the ranch,
Ah,
and it's like an old Western poster that's faded and bits peeling off it. It to me, it's exactly the perfect Star Wars poster.
nice. I might have seen it somewhere online or something, or in some book or something, but I don't recognize it right now though.
No,
Looks really nice though.
yeah, it's the best poster I think. It sums it up.
Right. And how did you feel when you won an Academy Award for it? Do you have it near you, by the way?
No, no, it's not
No,
here.
no, okay,
The we didn't expect it. Science fiction had never been recognized. There was still isn't yet
mm,
an Academy Award for a science fiction film per se as the actual film.
yeah, that's true.
Um, and so we didn't expect anything at all. And it was very, very shocking. We got called our names and had
I
to
can
go up and
imagine.
get this. Yeah. But John Barry, see, John Barry, who's died very young, unfortunately, meningitis, but John was brilliant designer and supported George in a massive way to get this film made for such a lowly budget.
Mm,
And when he gave the speech and he said, every frame of this film belongs to this man down there, George Lucas, which is true. George was highly engaged with us to get this done.
right.
It was a mammoth undertaking.
Oh,
It was a year of no days off, nothing. We worked endless hours every day to get this made.
when you told me all this now, what do you think about all these different version and adding digital effects on the movies?
Well, the first one, it's not just because I worked on it, because I also was associated with Empire Strikes Back, and I directed second unit for George on Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace. So we had
Mm,
two crews shooting Phantom Menace side by side. Um, Quite honestly, there were no other producers on set on that one. That was George's own money. He financed it with. It was $100 million.
right.
Rick McCallum, the producer, had sent the script to every Hollywood studio and said, "We may have to make this one through a studio. Can you give me an estimate?" Every studio estimated it at 400 million.
Right.
Um, and I think, George has been the single most important creative who has brought special effects up into a different level.
Mm,
The difference with George is that he never used it for the sake of it. He only used it ever to tell a story.
mm,
And every script he wrote, the effects were becoming kind of possible. So he would do what was only possible at the time. He'd write scenes that couldn't be done and then reckon somebody would figure out how to do it, which is what they did. So they've kind
that's
of
excellent.
transformed.
I know,
Yeah, he's
I know that in
ILM have
Industrial Light and Magic did made up. They had to build computers that could do the
that
effects.
was
Yeah.
yeah. There were no computers at the time when we started, and it was the same deal with them. They had taken the job on. Two of them, Richard Edlund and John Dykstra, and they decided we have to make a way that a camera can take one shot and then go back and repeat it.
Right.
So they built a computer which was the beginning of motion control. They
Mm.
spent a lot of the money on that. When George got back from England, they'd only done two shots. He freaked out because they needed hundreds.
It takes time. Huh.
Yeah, so they used mostly model shots, which they still do, which are always the best. If you can do it for real, do it.
Yeah,
That George always
definitely.
had believed that. Yeah, it kind of they broke a lot of ground for Star Wars and having the success that it did.
Yeah, it's very interesting that it keep on so long and there's so many different side things. Like you also worked on Rebels. I heard a little bit or something. Rebels, Star Wars Rebel, the animated.
They came to me because they wanted to get the lightsaber right,
Ah,
and so they I was taken to the ranch, and I would went to ILM, and Doug Chang had taken over. So they filmed me for a few hours. There was a crew of about 12 who were the designers for all of those. And I went through everything and how we did it, how we made it, and also with the animators to tell them because they wanted to get it right.
right.
They
That
took a
makes
lot
sense.
of
That's a
care.
good then to take you in then as an input for it. It's really nice.
Yes. Yeah, that was good.
You also worked in the on the seventh also. You can also in the upper
This one is.
corner you can change how these are set up the
Oh,
windows,
okay. Oh, I see. Yeah, it's okay. Well,
so
I
you
won't
can
change it
see
now,
see
but
bigger.
which one
Yeah,
is this one?
this is seven
Is
one
that
seven.
that's
I don't know if you can see closer. Yeah, it's maybe
is it is
it's a
that the
seven. Oh no, yeah. Oh no,
what
sorry. It's yeah seven. Yeah, the Force
7, 1, 2,
Awaken.
3, 4, 5, 6?
Force
No,
Awaken.
yeah, no, I didn't work on that.
Ah,
No, Doug Chan had spoken to me a lot, and he wanted me to go and be the advisor, but the producers didn't ever invite me. So,
uh-huh. Oh.
but they
Have you?
had all my stuff there, and they had everything there that I'd made, all the original props, weapons, everything. I know J.J.
Huh.
Abrams was very careful to research everything that I'd done.
He also did
What?
like real things,
Yeah, exactly.
specifically for that movie.
Yeah, what is in there? He had seen that when I the first set we ever made was the Millennium Falcon cockpit.
Ah,
I When I'd finished it, I took George down to show it to him, and he was really happy. And I said, "Listen, I like to personalize things, and you made American Graffiti, and in Ron Howard's car, you had a pair of dice hanging in the car, which was very popular in America." And I said, "Look, Han Solo's a gambler. I would like to hang one in here to personalize the ship, so
that is
which he
perfect.
loved." So he chose these little silver ones, which were my choice. Um, the director of photography, who I publicly state was awful to George the whole way through, had no interest in this film,
Hmm.
took them down after two shots because they were annoying him. So
Which
they
movie
are
do you
in the
mean now?
first
The first Star
on A
Wars?
New Hope,
Oh
the
yeah,
very
on a new.
first one.
Okay, yeah.
So in
Ah,
only two scenes you can see them there. They were legendary.
yeah,
So
definitely.
JJ had seen that and said, "I have to have those back." So they sourced and found the same pair as the
Hmm.
ones I put in. He hung them in them. But the scene he put them in, they cut out. So he didn't appear in that one
Oh no,
either.
I know. I heard about the had them, but oh, they're not in the movie. I never thought about
So
that.
they no, and then they actually
Oh,
there's a famous Vanity Fair cover of the cast. They're in the Millennium Falcon cockpit, and there they are, hanging there.
ah,
So, of course, then they became very important piece of emotion because um, Luke brings them and gives them to Leia
right.
as a memory of Han for him.
Huh.
Things like that were going on all the time. Stuff that we did.
If we back up a little bit, you named it a little bit before. You also worked. If we leave Star Wars now, I guess we can talk for Star Wars for days. Is really, but you have worked on a lot of other movies, interesting movies like
Yeah,
Alien, also.
like yeah, Alien. I was actually set decorating and art director. Well, I co-designed it with Terry Gilliam, Life of Brian, the Monty Python's
Mm.
movie.
All right, yeah.
Um, I was working on that when Alien started, so I wasn't free. Um, and then Life of Brian got cancelled,
Mm.
because the producer read the script and said it was blasphemous. This was 3 weeks before we were starting.
Oh.
And that same day it got cancelled. Ridley Scott called me and said, "Get your backside down to Shepperton. I need you down here." So I went there because I knew Ridley and I'd art directed commercials for him.
Oh.
Um, so I came down. They built skeleton wooden frames of the whole set, and the set decorator they'd hired was he did things like Howard's End, periods film. He had
Mm.
no idea what to do with science fiction films. So I explained to the producers and Ridley, we have to get scrap from junkyards, and we got it all in. And I built the first ever set for Alien for a screen test for Ridley for Sigourney Weaver.
Mm.
And he wanted to do it in a real piece of shit. He wanted to convince the studio she was right, and he knew just doing it against a white wall wouldn't work. So I built that first one out of junk and scrap,
Interesting.
and then that became the Alien. So I then got to work, and we had to build the entire ship. I got I was put in charge of the whole, like the bridge, the cockpit area.
Uh-huh.
Like just immense work with a crew, and again under budgeted. See, it was the
But
first
it's again though
R-rated.
that when it's limited, you it's perfect.
Yes, yeah, it pushes you
Yeah.
against the wall. But honestly, if I had all the budget, I'd do the same thing. So that's the way I think I had to make things look real. To me, as an audience member, not doing it, I didn't want to question what I was watching. The environment, like Tatooine, had to be a real planet to me.
Mm.
Everything had to look. And honestly, George always said, making A New Hope, that he was making a documentary, not a science fiction film. And that's the way I approached it. So yeah, that's the way I've always done things, really.
You
So yeah, Alien was it's being the first R-rated science fiction film. The studios were
mm.
really nervous about it, so the budget was way under what it should have been. But yeah, we got it done.
And you got nominated for that one also.
Yes,
That was
yeah, yeah.
um, I can see you have
Another
Black
surprise.
Angel behind you. That's your
Yes.
first movie
So
that you directed
George,
yourself.
yeah, so George, at the end of A New Hope, um, when Empire Strikes Back was going to be released in the cinemas, at that time there were no adverts, no commercials, no trailers. There was just a main film and a short film, about 33 minutes maximum short film. That was the program.
Mm.
He really disliked a short film that 20th Century Fox had chosen for A New Hope, the first Star Wars. So he said,
Do you remember what short it was,
um,
or do you know? Did he say?
no, I don't know. It was
That
something
would have been
about
interesting.
policemen. It was terrible, I know.
Uh,
But anyway, there was a British government grant of £25,000, very small, for filmmakers to make their first short film.
mm.
And all you had to have was somebody saying, "It'll go out, I'll release it with my film." So
Oh.
George asked for scripts to be sent to him to make a short film. And I didn't know about this. Pure accident. I was at the sound mixing on Alien because I was learning all that. And the head of Fox asked me what I was doing, and I said, "Well, I went back to film school because I'm now want to write and direct."
Mm.
And he read it and said, "Do you mind if I send this to George? Because we've only got until Friday to decide which short film to make, and we're not really convinced about all of them." And George immediately said, let Roger make this. See, afterwards, he has publicly said now that there were only 5 people who actually stood by his side to make that first Star Wars, and I was one of them. It was the art department, John Barry, myself, and Les Dilly. Nobody else knew, nobody else really. They just got on and worked on it because that's
He
the way
paid you
crews
back a little
did
bit there then
things.
for
So
that.
it was a thank you. Yeah, it
Mm.
was a thank you. So I had £25,000. I had the short ends of film from Empire Strikes Back they gave me because I could only afford 3 cans of film. And I went to Scotland and made this kind of my idea of an ancient kind of epic built around the code of a knight's um, quest,
I haven't
which was
seen
to
it. I
find a
saw.
maiden.
I saw. I don't know if it was. I think it was on your page on YouTube. You have it up there. I think it was
It's yeah, it's
your
still
poem.
there. Yeah,
So
it's
I.
got about a million hits. It
Yeah.
it
Nice.
it got lost. The negative got lost. It's a long story. The Rank Studios went bankrupt in England, and all the negatives that were there got shipped out to Universal. No one knew where they were.
Huh.
No one had a print or a negative of Black Angel. It had gone. George Lucas had one. It had gone missing. So um, it was Wired magazine. I don't know. It was about 8 years ago, 9 years ago. Contacted me and said, "Look, your short film Black Angel has an important role in the history of cinema. What John Borman, who made Excalibur, had invited me down in front of the whole crew to show that film and say, this is what I want Excalibur to be."
Oh.
And of course, the location was the same used for Highlander. And Game of Thrones was pilot was shot in Scotland, and they'd seen my short and they used some of the similar locations. They lost it, then it went to Ireland. Scotland
Uh,
lost Game of Thrones, but it had all this influence. And then George had really liked how I'd slowed down my fight scene. I'd slowed it
right,
down
right.
because I so I'd slowed it down because I didn't have enough to make up my 25 minutes. And my editor at the time said, "Look, there's a way to duplicate the negative, and you." He showed me you duplicate it once, twice, three, four, five, 6 times, and it made my fight look so much better
And
because
again,
I couldn't have stunt
Limitless
people.
is making things.
Limitless. And he then slowed the fight down using the same technique in Empire Strikes Back. He went down and slowed it down, the Yoda fight.
It's amazing.
So so Wired magazine did this article on it called Forgotten Relics, and uh, blow me, I got a call from the Universal Studios archivist. And he said, "Are you Roger Christian?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Did you make a film, Black Angel?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "What was the company?" And I said, "It was my company called Painted Lady." And he said, "I've got your negative."
Amazing.
Um, and when I picked myself up off the floor, I kind of said, "Can I keep it there until I know where I can safely have it sent?" And blow me, a few months later, I got a call from a restoration company in San Francisco who restored some of the Star Wars for George and a lot of other movies. And they said they wanted to restore it for me as a gift.
Nice.
So this is how it all happened. And they restored it. Skywalker looked at the sound and said, "We don't want to change it. We're just going to clean it up." It was done by the best sound mixer at the time ever in the world, who did all of Stanley Kubrick's movies.
Nice.
And it got shown at the Mill Valley Film Festival, first time ever in America. I was invited to go to Scotland and show it in 4 little cinemas.
Oh, you didn't do it?
and open. I did. So
Ah,
I did. The guy said, "You'll have to come round in my car." It was very low budget, but it opened the Glasgow Film Festival, and it was in a 100-seat cinema. By the time it was screened, it was 400 people, 400
oh,
seaters,
amazing.
and it went viral. Then it went viral. The BBC did an article on it, which got 500,000 hits in a week, and it just went viral as the restored version of it. And so I'm now making the feature like 40, 50 years later
Yeah, you did then
as
in
a
the Go Go campaign in 2015, right?
yeah, early on, just to get it kind of going and to help because of finance.
Right.
And so I'm now making this as a, and the problem here with doing the feature is
It's
that
not
Game of
limitless again,
Thrones
maybe.
is completely the same way as we made Star Wars the first one with no money.
Ah,
It Game of Thrones took that look that I created, and Game of Thrones owns the world. And I thought, if I
mm,
go and do the same thing now, I'm going to look like I'm copying them. So I went to a kind of one of my first ideas, and I'm doing it like a spaghetti western, but an ancient epic. I'm doing it in Morocco in dusty western kind of style.
that sounds interesting.
So that's now we'll be shooting early next year,
Nice.
and
And
it's part of a saga.
it's supposed to be a trilogy, I think,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
so I realized as well that it would work better for us when we sell it as a trilogy. And I had three stories anyway. So the first one is going to be called The Sword of Tyrus.
Mm.
The second one is called The Rise of the Blood Moon. And the third one will be Black Angel. That's when he comes back and the end, the big final climax of it.
Nice.
So it's a kind of Black Angel saga, and we're making it very. What I kind of learnt my lessons of Star Wars, and when I was directing, it's my favorite film, Nostradamus, that I made.
Yeah, I really like
Um,
how that one looks. This one, I had
so
Nostradamus. It's
so this is
really well.
similar. I got this basic script developed and written, um, and the working title were just starting out as they become the biggest independent film company in Britain, but they were trying to secure a deal and they'd estimated the budget at $20 million.
Mm.
And I had
For
Checky
Nostradamus.
Cario, yeah.
Okay, right.
And so I had Checky Cario in the lead, who is just the most amazing actor who I'd seen, in so many films. And I wanted him. I knew we wouldn't get 20 million. They'd start saying we want big stars in it. So I got offered by a German producer, Harold Reichebner.
Mm.
He took me to Berlin and said if I was willing to go to Romania, I could make the same film for $4 million. So I went. It was the same year as the revolution. We were staying in hotels with shell holes in the walls, and the crews got $1 a day under communism,
Oh,
um, and it was medieval France. Just the look everywhere. I could shoot in towns and cities. Didn't change anything. The faces of the people
it's nice
matched.
when you don't need to when you have it that you can, as you say, you don't need
Yeah.
to change so much then.
And for that $4 million, we built an entire medieval city on the back lot. It's still there in Romania,
Nice.
in the studios. And so we did it for $4 million, and when it was seen in America, they valued it at $20 million.
Nice.
It's a skill that is becoming increasingly desired now because even the streamers, they're all finding out you
Mm.
you can't go on spending 100 to $400 million on a movie on a risk. okay,
Uh,
big American kind of superhero movies work, but everybody's now finding the way to go back in a way to how George made the first Star Wars.
right.
Uh,
In Nostradamus, how was it to work with Rutger Howard?
but Rooker, I love because with the English backers, they wanted to shore it up, and they said, okay, who can we cast? And with Checky Carrier, I had Julia Ormond, who then wasn't a star at all. She was
Mm.
just starting. Um, I said I knew Rutger's agent very, very well in London, and he suggested Rutger to me, and I said, okay, I'll offer him King Henry. He'd be perfect for it. And Rutger actually phoned me and said, listen, I want to play this mystic monk.
Yeah,
And I
it's
said,
very interesting.
I'm,
On my cover here, it just says the
yes,
name on the people, but under Rutger Hauer it says as the mysterious monk. Only on him it
yeah,
says that. The
yeah.
others is just a name. It's really
Well,
funny cover.
it's a much shorter, smaller part. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yes, you'll understand. He'd worked for Olmi, the great Italian director who made three of the wooden clogs. And he
Hmm.
told me he'd had a spiritual experience. And he said, I'm right for this part. I want to do it. So
Oh,
he arrived in Romania. We kind of met that night after shooting. And he said to me, would you mind if I rewrote some of the part? And
ah,
it's always a bit tricky as a director, you never know. And I said, okay. He explained to me why and what he wanted to do. He'd brought an old typewriter with him. Don't forget, there's no
oh,
computers in those days.
interesting,
So
nice.
I got this coffee stained paper in the morning. He'd spend all night, and it was absolutely brilliant. We went through it and we changed a few things to adapt them. But speaking with Rutger, you never had a direct communication with him. His mind works in a different way to other people. And it was perfect for a monk who'd been beaten up and beaten senseless and whose mind was not working properly. And
Right.
then he came up with the idea of a painter in medieval times to be able to get enough light to see had stuck candles on a hat.
Yeah.
And he got that made himself by the Romanian guys in the crew. And it when I saw it, it was the time when Nostradamus was um, went missing, and he kind of found something different. And so when I saw this, I thought this is a perfect representation, and I put him out of focus
Hmm.
with Nostradamus was almost unconscious in the foreground, and he sees coming towards him this vision, like a vision from heaven. And then we pull focus onto Rutger. He was very proud of this part, and sad he's died. He was going to be in the Black Angel in the first film, but
Hmm.
has sadly passed away before I could get it made. I loved him. I see all the cast, and I had F. Murray Abraham, who was fresh off an Academy Award for Amadeus.
Ah.
Um, I had to forewarn them all. I said, "You're coming to a country, you're going to be in the best hotel there is. There's no good complaining, thinking we're cheating you with a cheap budget. There are cockroaches, there's everything, there's no food." And I said, if you're coming to complain, then don't come. You've got to come with the spirit. Now they all did.
Oh, that's
Everybody did.
excellent.
It helped.
Excellent.
Yeah. So again, it's the same kind of, if it's truthful up front, I think it goes onto the screen that way.
Yeah, yeah,
What you
definitely.
what you were saying.
You made another sci-fi movie in '84, I think. Starship.
Yeah, that was another one that
It's
I was
interesting
offered the
that
chance.
I I I like sci-fi movies also, and I've watched a lot of movies, especially a lot of sci-fi from the '80s. But I never heard
Right.
of this movie. This was really
No,
new for me when I looked up
it's
about you now.
got it's got a different title. I think I don't know what happened. I got it made in Australia again. It was no money. It was offered to me, and when we got there, there wasn't the money, and we were kind of stuck. We were all contracted to do it, so I got it
Mm.
made somehow. Um, I was getting it edited. The producer had got no money left, so it got bought out, and the man who bought it out, I had one of Genesis, um, the keyboard player, brilliant,
Mm.
absolutely brilliant, do the music. And they said, no, no, we're taking that off. And he put an uncle on to do the music, who'd done the music
Well, that
in
seems
LA.
bad.
They completely, yeah, that's so I kind of never had copies of it. I just disowned it.
Hmm.
Um,
I've
but
seen
it's kind
some
of got a
pictures on it. It
classic,
seems
yeah,
pretty interesting.
it's an interesting story because it was kind of about rebellion and anarchy. I was trying to do some other stuff in it. It had very interesting special effects we did with some of the guys who were on the crew in Alien were starting their own company, and we did some amazing model shooting on it.
Mm.
Everything was done, so it's got a kind of cult following now somewhere.
I definitely need to
So
check it out.
yeah, it's the
And
way sometimes things go.
yeah, there is also one could say that you are. Is it right to say that you are most famous for Star Wars, and then you are also very, very famous for this movie,
Yes,
Battlefield Earth?
yeah. So
How
this one,
how did you happen to? Because I haven't seen this yet, sadly,
well,
but I've
you
heard
should watch it.
a lot of bad things said about it. That's all I.
Yeah,
So, and
the
did you see the other interview that I did of the other guy from
as a
Sweden?
part of it. Yes, yeah, I
He
did. I saw.
this is his favorite movie. That guy.
Well,
So
many
yeah,
people
it's
too. What
interesting.
happened? So J- John Travolta wanted to make this as a movie for himself,
Mm,
and no one would do it because of Scientology.
right.
It's nothing to do with Scientology. This book is written. Ron Hubbard was the biggest pulp fiction writer. He wrote 48 pulp fiction novels,
Mm,
and he was famous as a science fiction writer. Battlefield Earth is, I think, it's in the top 10 books of all time
mm.
in terms of sales. It's a brilliant, brilliant science fiction book.
Is the book the same? The book has the same title,
Yes,
right? Okay.
yeah, and the book is fantastic. You'll see it's in two parts. So I got a call to go and have dinner with John Travolta. He'd seen Nostradamus and absolutely loved it and realized that I was not afraid of actors or big
Uh,
actors or whatever. And the trailer for Phantom Menace had broken in America.
mm,
And by chance, a lot of the shots in it were shots that I'd done. And Travolta had phoned George Lucas and said, "Look, we've got very little budget to do this movie with," and George told him, "Well, Roger's your guy."
mm,
So I met, and I said, "Well, let's do it." Um, we had at the time only $12 million to do a huge movie, but Don Carmody was a producer who was doing movies in Montreal and doing big movies. So he said, "Come to Montreal. You can. No one's ever done a movie like this. You can make a movie incredibly cheaply there. What you would normally spend a fortune in London or LA for."
right.
So we did. We made this movie. The budget went to a real level once all the stars had come in and everything, and Travolta and everything. So it was a $75 million budget, and we made the film for 44.
Oh,
I
yeah.
decided to I wanted with John, and we wanted to make the first kind of pulp science fiction movie out of it,
Interesting.
which is what we did, and which is, but on the release, we were outscoring Gladiator in numbers, everything
Ah, it was
before
at the
it
same
came
time
out.
as Gladiator. Right, right.
Yeah, and so the rival studio put the publicity machine in vengeance against us, saying this film is a Scientology movie, and if you go to this, they literally said,
Mm.
if you go to the cinema, you'll become a Scientologist.
Hmm.
Um, and unfortunately, it worked. It just destroyed the release.
Oh, that's not good.
And so, what you're saying, see, I have since then, even when it went out, we have so many emails and texts and everything, people saying, well, I believed all the bad stuff, but when I saw it, this film's really interesting.
Right. That's
So,
with me
you
that
know,
I'm not believing what people are saying is you cannot take that as your thing because if whatever people say, you can have a different opinion, of course. So you need to
yeah,
trust yourself.
yeah,
But yeah, I haven't.
critic slammed it.
Yeah, except the one that I interviewed from Sweden here that said this was his favorite
Yes.
movie. I haven't heard anyone said it was good. That also it
Well,
that
a
make me wonder
journalist,
also. So I'm definitely gonna see it. And it's sad that I
yeah,
haven't seen it myself now. I feel so I could tell you.
when it was interesting when John Travolta was, he never went on to Diane. I've forgotten her name. She was the biggest of the um, celebrity programs where they interview people. He'd
Oprah?
never gone on
No.
that. Not Oprah. It was before Oprah, right before her. Um, when she asked him on the program, so what are you most proud of? And he said Battlefield Earth.
Hmm.
And I think that was answered. And out of interest, I met Quentin Tarantino because of it.
Uh-huh.
John Travolta put me on a plane with him, and he came to the premiere. He hugged both John and I. He said, love this movie. This is what I want to write. This is really what I want to do, but it's going to
Right.
take 20 years. You've got so much anti-Scientology stuff. I'm
Hmm.
not a Scientologist, but I respect democracy. You know, everyone, especially in America, you have the right to follow whichever religion
Yeah, of course.
is you know, it's, and it got John through terrible tragedies. I respect that, the man.
Hmm.
So it's nothing to do with it. And in fact, if you look at the book Battlefield Earth, in the opening introduction, Ron Hubbard says, I know that the people who are following my serious work, which means his church, will be disappointed, but I just wanted to write a rip-roaring science fiction story.
Hmm. That was interesting.
Nothing to do with it. Yeah, it's nothing to do with it.
I will
Not that I
send
have
you a
anything
message
against it.
what I think about it when I see it.
Yeah,
I will do that
yeah.
definitely.
It was a real experiment. We were a little bit too early. We wanted to make a kind of graphic novel out of it, how it looked. We dutched the camera to give it like graphic novel, the way that they are on graphic novel, you know, um, comics and things.
Do you mean more like
So
Sin City, or what do you mean?
just the way when you look at a graphic novel, say you look at Batman,
Mm.
the way the angles, everything it goes
Ah,
and
the angle.
moves
Ah, you're
through,
right,
and
right,
all the
right.
angles and
That's what you
everything,
mean.
we wanted to kind of make it feel like it was, because it was a pulp fiction
Right. That hits home
story.
for me though. I like comics and stuff, so
Yeah,
that yeah.
yeah. So it's that kind of feel to it. And again, John Travolta and I we went to the ranch to show George and ILM, the whole crew there. They wanted to see it when we finished it.
Mm.
And George grabbed me afterwards, said, you explain to me how you made this movie for $45 million. I don't understand.
Nice.
And my answer was simple. I said, I don't own ILM, George. We we used I used independent effects houses. I got it all done ourselves through different ways of doing it in different countries.
Right.
And I got it made. They couldn't understand how we'd made this huge movie for this budget.
Ah.
It's the same story. And in fact, the ships, you will see our ships in it. Spielberg loved them and
Is
asked
that these
how and
helicopters I
where.
can see in the front here?
Yeah, yeah, that's the Cyclo ship. So um, he, we told Spielberg that they were done by a small company in outside of Montreal,
Hmm.
who we took a risk on, and they did 85 of the shots. Spielberg went to them, and the ships in Minority Report are our ships, but they just put the different clothing on them, gave them a different look.
Oh,
And he'd
like a
never he'd
different
never been
skin
out.
on them.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah, yeah.
That
So
movie I've
it
seen.
has a
It's
lot of stuff.
hmm. I will
It's
look
a
that
very
up.
good movie,
Interesting.
that one. Yeah. So, it's there's lots of stuff go on behind the scenes, but what can you do? You just have to keep working and
Hmm.
doing what you believe in, and do the best you can, which is what we did with the budget and everything.
Definitely.
It's an interesting movie. Even Roger Ebert, the famous critic. One of the journalists went back to him just a few years ago and said, "Would you re-evaluate this?" Because he followed all the other critics and they all went at it.
Ah. What?
And
What?
he actually told him, he said, "This movie is actually really interesting."
Oh.
So there's another side to the story.
Of course, it's always is. Always is.
Yeah, yeah,
You also made Prisoner of the Sun in 2013.
yes.
I think I've seen it, but I'm not really sure. But it felt really interesting.
It was a project that one of the lawyers I was working with had inherited from uh, what's his name, Hitchcock. He died recently, and the script was all over the place, but it
Mm.
was a very interesting premise. And they asked if I would do him a favor and look at it and do a rewrite, which I did. And the German Nostradamus producer took it over and said, "I know you can do this. I know we can go to Morocco. We don't have that much money, but let's do it." So we did.
Mm.
Um, and um, we yeah, it was an interesting movie to make. And I mean, I had to kind of restore the entire story as quickly as I could. It was no time. It was one of those.
Mm.
Um, and then at the end, another of these stories whereby another German producer took it over and they tried to finish it themselves.
Ah.
Um, and then, thank goodness, that failed so badly that another major science fiction producer took it over and got it made. And it's okay. The final end is now watchable.
Oh, so
Got interesting
you
stuff in it.
wasn't along in it till the end, you mean?
No, no, another
Ah.
time it got taken away and they finished it. Yeah,
Hmm. What is
these
the
stories
story
happen.
in it?
It's the story of a um, legendary pyramid that was lost and that it had at the center of it this whole kind of it was the prediction of the future of Osiris, who was a star that was here.
It's a little bit
And
the
so
Indiana Jones Da Vinci Code
it's
thing. Yeah.
yeah, it's like that. It was an explorer who was hired to go and search for it,
Interesting.
and it got revealed in a storm. And I had John Rhys Davis, who was a nasty. He was the bad man in it. He wanted the power for himself because it would
I
give
think
you
I've seen it.
ultimate power.
So, yeah.
So
Mm.
there were a lot of traps and things like all this fun stuff you have to go through and avoid
Nice.
getting killed and everything. So we it was a fairly big kind of ancient Egyptian sets and everything we had to make. Yeah.
Hmm. It's sad when projects are taken away. Like the island of
Yes.
Dr. Moreau is a very good example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of them.
Mm.
That's littered with them. Even an Alien, the end shots of that valley
Mm.
where they're driving away. The producers put that in. That's an outtake from The Shining.
Ah.
That wasn't the ending.
It's sad when you hear
So
stuff like that. That's
I know
it
it
shouldn't
happens. It happens all
be
the
like that.
time,
Yeah.
but we have to make the best of it.
Yeah. So I think we have gone over basically a little bit here and there in your career. But
Yes.
tell me about the future, except of these the trilogies. That only maybe in the future. Do you have anything else except that?
Yeah, that's been my kind of legacy because I started there and I want to really get that made, and it's been 7 or 8 years trying to get it financed and put together, and I think we've now done it. And I've got a very good cast. John Rhys Davis is in it,
Mm.
Checky Cario, and I have Toby Kebbell playing the lead, who is an actor who is exactly who I would have cast, like in the first film.
That's
He's
perfect.
exactly the knight, what I want. They're all real. They'll give it that, and they're all high class actors. So I'm filling the whole thing like that, and I'm determined to make all three.
I hope
I've
you do.
got. We're in the middle of a. I wrote a science fiction animation series which dwelt on something that Elon Musk had said, that he was determined to conquer Mars and
By
start
exploding
building.
it, atomic bomb the place.
Yeah, well, he was going to build factories and build cars and do all sorts of things. But he said, you know what, we have to, we're going to have to destroy quite a few people to do it. So I thought, you know what? And I was foreseeing AI coming. So I said, no, that's not going to happen. They'll reproduce humans as robots,
Mm.
and they'll be able to download their brains. So they take the 9 people required to build a colony, and it's at the time where the Earth is failing because of climate change and everything. So they're having
Mm.
to find a new home. So they send a multi-zillionaire who owns the world's power supplies, finances 9 of them to go and build a colony. And it's the kind of fun stuff because they've got brains that
Right.
have all of this knowledge but no actual experience. They don't know what love is. They don't know any of these things. So they're building a colony. They're building gardens where they can grow food. They're building sewer systems because humans have waste, all of this.
Right.
And throughout the series, that's slowly dawning on them that if humanity is to survive, it's them. Because they
Yeah.
have power units that are infinite. As they move and collect, they recharge. And that
Is
these
this
humans are so frail. So
right?
we're working on that. We're in the middle of that. That's being done in India and
Is
being
that an
animated.
animation?
Yes, full
Yeah.
animation
Interesting.
series. And I have another book that I've just finished writing that I want to
Oh yeah,
put
you
out
had a
because I
book,
wrote
Cinema Alchemist. You had that. You
Cinema
also made
Alchemist. Yeah,
a.
This
Uh,
one,
Documentary about, yeah, that one.
yeah. So that's where you can read everything. I put all the stories in there about how it's everything we've talked about, and then I've just finished a documentary that we managed to make again with
Mm.
hardly any money. We couldn't get the financing for it. Um, Even though it's the legacy of Star Wars, how the whole thing was made, and it's very interesting. I've Guillermo del Toro is a major part of it.
Mm.
He's very erudite on Star Wars and how the legend and everything. I have Gareth Edwards, who directed Rogue One, and now just finished The Creator.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's him.
He's
Yeah, yeah, he did the Creator also. Yeah, I
he
forgot that.
yeah.
That's him.
So he's very erudite as well. He's explaining his journey of science fiction through Star Wars and the impact it had. And Carl Newman, who directed Fanboys. And I have archive footage and animation sequences, and it's the full story of how Star Wars was made. Everything detailed in it.
That's
So
excellent.
that's going to come out pretty soon.
Is that going to be
Um,
on Netflix thing?
we don't know who will take it. It should belong on Disney Plus
Oh,
because they
right,
have
right. Yeah,
all
yeah,
the
that makes sense.
because in the making of official ones,
Mm.
no one knew how we did it. We're not even mentioned, John Barry or I, nobody, because George was making the movie. Nobody knew. Um, John Barry died and Gary Kurtz has died. I mean, there's no one left to tell the story of how this thing actually got put together. So it's all in there, all the stories.
That's a good
I
thing to
think I
do.
sent you a link. I
Yeah,
sent you
yeah,
a
I did.
link. You can
I
look at
watched
that.
not the fully of it, but I watched a good part of it.
Yeah.
Really well made, I would say.
Yeah, we did it ourselves, an editor and I. During COVID, I couldn't travel. I had to
Mm.
make up ways how I could interview people, which I did with an interactive studio I found in Toronto.
Yeah, it looked good though.
You know, again, it's just, it seems my career goes this way that I'm
Well,
having to
that's
find
where
ways to get things done, but it
it.
keeps me alive and it keeps me
Yeah,
young.
it's maybe also you that search in this area that you feel most comfortable in because you know how to work in that area, and you can use your creativity in a good way.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. And I've got another, I'm going to be the showrunner and a kind of consultant on a Indian television series that I'm
Mm.
signed to, but we're not, I don't know when they'll get the money for that. And there's a couple of other projects that I really want to do. So
Hope you
those
do them
are
all.
all bubbling away. I'm determined to.
That's what you need to do.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny enough, Sweden, when Black Angel, it was distributed in America, Japan, anywhere they had a short film, but a producer in Sweden bought the rights to Black Angel to show it in cinemas there. That's how it
Hmm.
came out in Sweden.
Interesting.
He was he owned one of the big video production studios. In fact, he was the financier on um, the Starship film.
Ah, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
It's interesting how everything is connected.
it connects. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as the last thing, is there something you want to say to people that are struggling in the movie world?
Yeah, I always, I paraphrase it with the students at film school, and when I've done lectures and stuff, I always tell them, listen, if there's a brick wall in front of you and you're trying to climb up it and your fingers are down to the bone, and then when you land, somebody kicks you in the ribs. If you then say, you know what, I'm going over that wall, that's the quality you need. And secondly, if you've got talent, that's a bonus.
Yeah,
So
I like that.
um, you just have to try to believe in yourself, and it's the hardest thing. I mean, everybody around me told me you can't go in the film industry. My father said I was going to be a doctor, an architect, or a priest. I was broke, I didn't have any money. I somehow stuck to my guns, and as filmmakers, you have to open your instinct. And the instinct, then you will see if opportunities are coming, you will recognize them, because if it's closed, it won't. And see, when I met John Box, the designer, my first job, I had
Mm.
this folder full of drawings and illustrations and artwork, and he folded it up and he said, "Listen, I will take you on if you're willing to make the tea." And I said, "John, I'm whatever you want." And he said, "I'll tell you a story. So you're in the desert and there's an aeroplane next to you and you've got a bottle of green ink in your pocket and big cloud of dust. Here comes the director and the producer. Wow, this is fantastic. Can you have it read by tomorrow morning?"
Yeah.
That's the film industry. And you do it or you talk your way out of it with an alternative on that moment.
Right, right.
I reminded John when I met him later in life about that because it served me throughout all of this kind of the trials and tribulations you go through. But you just have to find your voice, and it's the hardest thing,
You have to have an
you
open
know.
mind
Yeah,
and don't lock
a,
it.
um, a very very well known American psychologist who I followed um, did a whole series of healing on PBS. He wrote a lot of books, and then he did a whole series, 48 episodes, and each one that opened, it's something that struck me profoundly. He says, most people, especially in the West,
Mm.
die without knowing who they really are.
Mm.
And these words struck profoundly to me. So, use meditation, use whatever you can do to find your voice, and try to tell it. Like me, the Black Angel was the first thing I ever wrote and made, and it came from my own. It actually came from when I was in Weymouth working on Lucky Lady. Three of us
Mm.
got paratyphoid. I was the worst. I was dying in hospital,
Oh,
literally.
what happens when you get that?
Paratyphoid, you get so weak, and we were
Ah,
shooting in horrendous heat in the summer because the film had gone over schedule. It was getting worse and worse. And being British, we just keep going. You keep going. You don't.
right.
Oh, I'm be okay. And I was collapsed. They put me in hospital. On the wall, there was a poster of Scotland. I don't know why. I must. And I thought then, one day, you know what? I'm not going to die here. And I crawled my way out. That I realized when I was writing the book and analyzing where stories come from is how I subconsciously written this story about the fight against death.
Mm.
And my black angel was death. So you have to find these links, I think. You find kind of whatever is deeply connecting to you. That's what I tell people.
Well
And
put.
more. I mean, I lecture sometimes, but you have to encourage. Everyone around you is going to say, "Don't, no." And the last line in my book, I will read you. And everything I
Do it.
do is like it's a mentorship, right? It's not about look what I did, look at the ego, look at how famous we are. Nothing to do with that. And the last line in my book is I have written this chapter because my last words to anyone aspiring to follow their dreams are truly pertinent more than ever. Do not let anyone tell you you can't, you can. Just have a dogged determination and never give up. So that's,
Great
you
words.
know, yeah, it works. And I know how hard it is, believe me.
Yeah, you've known it many times all through your career,
Yes,
it seems.
yes, yeah, exactly. There we are. Well, I hope that was interesting.
It was. And thank you for being letting me talk to you and interview. And thank you so much for that.
That's okay. Send me a link when you do it,
I will
and I
definitely do
will
that.
help blast it out.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And you. Bye.
And that's it. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Take
Bye.
care of yourself.